Okay, hi everybody. And now, sorry, my voice is a little rough today. Um, I did 22 minutes and 40 seconds of the intro to this particular program, which is program 20. And I'm going to have to really call it 20.2, or maybe I can call it 20.1, because it really didn't work out. I was rushing because Tuya and I had another broadcast coming up, or Zoom cast. Something was coming up. And so I got myself into a position where it didn't really show what I wanted to show. A splice might have been necessary anyway, um, and it was going to be less of a presentation than I wanted. So I'm going to do the whole thing again. And, well, I'm just counting on the fact that in the previous program I gave enough reading the Tibetan's words and also making some suggestions. We've been dealing with the science of impression, and DK tells us that the name, the science of impression, is that given to the process whereby the establishment of the required relationship in all these units of life takes place. We've been dealing with telepathy, the science of impression, and we're coming up to the supreme science of contact. The technique of invocation and evocation, he says, is the name given to the mode or method whereby the desired relationship is brought about. So the establishment of the required relationship under the science of impression brought about by the technique of invocation and evocation. And the creative work, says the Tibetan, is the name given to the manifestation of the results of the two above. So, what have we? Two above processes. Okay, now let's see if anything anything can show up. I'm not sure that it can. I would like to write these down if I could, but for some reason I'm not getting I'm not getting the method. So, well, we have a little something there, don't we? So, we have um, I'll put it like this: science of invocation and evocation. That's the technique. And before that comes the science of impression. And then, actually, it should be called here the technique of invocation and evocation, followed by the creative work. Okay. The three aspects of the technique of invocation and evocation, says the Tibetan, with which the average disciple should concern himself are those of building the antakarana, the correct use of the lower mind in its two higher functions, that is, the holding of the mind steady in the light, and the creation of the desired thought forms, and number three, and the process of precipitation, whereby the impression is enabled eventually to take tangible form. So let's see if if it will work. Okay, so this is number one, and I'm going to put it in red. And then number two, and then number three. Okay. All of this is an attempt to bring into tangible form intuitions, vague apprehensions from the Buddhic plane, and sometimes a little lower from the what we call the soul, so that, as in the white magical process, there can be a kind of precipitation, or the taking of actual form on the lowest level of our usual etheric physical plane, so that the plan does work itself out on Earth. Okay. And here comes an understatement From the Tibetan, in the above exegesis, I have given you much food for thought in connection with telepathic possibilities. I want to interpolate that, of course, all these uh, areas being discussed are under the general topic of telepathy, but wider and more universal coverage is being dealt with in the science of impression and in the great supreme science of what's it called? Contact. The supreme science of contact. So all of this is about telepathy in various gradations, all the way from dealing with the individual to dealing with the universal. And let us remember that when we enter the Aquarian age, it is known as the age of universality. We have a sequence of states that are related to meditation. By now you know this. Leo concentration, Virgo meditation, Libra contemplation, Scorpio illumination, Sagittarius inspiration, Capricorn initiation, and Aquarius, I can't really find an I word, but I guess universalization. Universalization is indicative. And then back to the I words for Pisces, identification. So much food for thought has been given by the Tibetan, and he goes on to say, it all fits into the theme of world service, as it is to be applied in the expansion of the human consciousness on a large scale. Now, that large scale has much to do with the science of impression and with the supreme science of contact. Those sciences take in the general picture and are not working so much with telepathy in relation to the individual. What would it be like? Human consciousness expands. Okay, so this theme of world service and the expansion of human consciousness on a large scale, and we certainly need it now. This is, says the Tibetan, one of the major tasks, only one, but a major task, one of the major tasks of the new group of world servers. And certainly consciousness can expand along 7 ashramic lines, but perhaps it is the second ray, which has a ray ashram, which now is highly populated. That it's that second ray ashram, which has the major task in this work. Well, okay, I did that last time, and I never know whether from one doing to the next I will find similarities, include the same topics. There can be some variety, but in any case, we are on telepathy and the Etheric Vehicle video commentary, and that took place on the 3rd of November, but today is the 8th of November, and I'm calling this program 20.1. I will ask BL to get rid of the other one because it just didn't show what might have been. So we begin with program 20.1, and we're on this redo. In the last analysis, I think a redo is the wisest thing under the circumstances. Now, getting into that program, it's about the supreme science of contact. It is 6 normal pages long, and DK tells us it would be useful if you attempted to master and to assimilate what I have to impart anent the 3 great sciences which form the 3 modes of expression we might term the supreme, of what we might term the supreme science of contact. So, 3 great sciences, and what are these 3 sciences, which are all equally, says the Tibetan, all equally independent, interdependent, and all related to the art of responsiveness. And I'd like to say that as we come closer to initiate a status and mastership, we become more and more responsive to impression, which can be, of course, a very subtle expression. So what are the three sciences? Which are three modes of expression. Well, so now we begin the three interdependent modes of expression, or sciences. Now, when knowledge is very codified and systematized, then we have science. Okay. Okay. Three interdependent modes of expression. Number one, the science of impression is related to the will to be. In my mind, anyway, the will to be is always related to Aries because of the driving forward which has such an impact upon others. This science of impression has, according to the Tibetan, relation to the spiritual triad, and the source of its emanation is Shamballa. So basically he's telling us that the science of impression, as far as we are concerned, is emanating from Shamballa. And from Shamballa it is, according to the Tibetan, connected with the abstract mind. Well, think about that for a minute. The abstract mind is at the lowest level of the spiritual triad and the highest subplane of the higher mental plane, and Shambhala is found on the four ethers, two of which are occupied with the spiritual triad and two still higher with the monad and with the great council. So let's see if I can I'd like to get some images here, um, somehow. What I think, what I will do is go to Tuya's uh, rendition, if I can find it, making one's way forward is not easy. Oh, well, there I think we have it. And if I were to go forward a bit, we would see that from the monadic level, from the will aspect, through active intelligence, there is a direct connection with the abstract mind. Now I want you to see that. I guess I want to share the screen. You see, from the will aspect to the active intelligence aspect of the monad down to the abstract mind. So that makes, I think, perfect sense. Okay. So that's kind of the first ray alignment in the three sciences which are the underpinning of the supreme science of contact. Three interdependent modes of expression. All right. Then, another of the interdependent modes of expression is the science, and I should, in a way, call it the technique of invocation and evocation. It is related to love or attraction. And it's related to the soul in all forms. DK says, relation to the soul in all forms. It's something a little bit different and a little bit lower than the true soul or ego, which is the spiritual triad. The source of emanation, and here he qualifies, at this time is the hierarchy, which comes forth and shares, as DK has been sharing, the science or technique of invocation and evocation. And it is connected with the lower mind as the agent of the soul. Now, does that make sense? Let's see. Now, looking here again, we see that the soul, how did he put it? The soul and the lower mind are on the same plane. What we normally call the soul, causal body, egoic lotus, is located on the upper two, especially subplanes 3 and 2 of the higher mental plane, and the concrete mind on subplanes 4, 5, 6, or 7. So I think we see there the necessary relationship, just the way from Shamballa through the active intelligence aspect of the monad down to the monastic permanent atom, there is a direct line of connection. That makes sense. And now there is a connection between the soul and subplanes 2 and 3 and the especially concrete areas of the mind, subplanes 4, 5, 6, and 7. So far, everything fits. Now, I don't want to pause my sharing. I want to keep going. Now, there is simply the science of telepathy. I guess it has to do more with the third aspect of divinity. And what does it say? It relates to mind and human intelligence. I think it rather begins there in its normal mode, or the mode that lies ahead of us if we don't get swept away by instinctual telepathy, the I've got a feeling type of telepathy, and it is related to the personality. A mind and human intelligence is the topmost point being here considered, and it's related to the whole personality from the fourth level of the mental plane. Let's see if I can So, the source of emanation is not Shamballa, it's not the soul, it's humanity itself. And finally, the anchorage point. DK tells us it's connected with the head center. So it begins with the mind, and within humanity, and makes its way to the head center. Now, oh my, what's that? That's me, or that's quite startling. Hmm. Well, that's quite a bit, and too much really to look into. Okay, I want to have something else here. Okay, that was one of those little moments, but from the lower mental plane, we find that the personality itself has its positioning on that lower mental plane. And so from the mind to the personality and all the way down to the head center located here on the first subplane of the normal etheric plane, we have a connection. Well, all of these things are like a map, and we can see the logic of the map, but to experience what the map indicates, this is another matter. So anyway, um, the third one of these interdependent sciences or techniques, um, following the science of impression, the science or technique of invocation and evocation. Evocation is the science of telepathy. We start with the human mind this time, and not with the soul. and we start with human intelligence. But since the personality center is located on the same level as the uh, normal concrete human mind, then the relationship is easy to see. The relationship between the mind or human intelligence and the personality as a whole. The source of emanation is not Shamballa, not hierarchy, but humanity itself. And finally, it anchors itself in the head center. From the mind through the personality, there is an anchorage in the major head center. Now, I think we really have to reflect upon these relationships. We are looking for impression, and it's coming, it's there, but can we actually feel where it is from? That is our question. And DK says, you will see how all these pairs of opposites play their part. Interesting that he calls them opposites, exemplifying the dual nature of our planetary life. Now, here are, I think, some of the opposites. Well, it's pretty obvious that from the monad to the spiritual intelligence of the monad and to the abstract mind, we can descend to the lower mind. The lower mind has 4 spirals or spirille. The abstract mind has 3 spirals or spirille. You put the 2 together and you get the necessary 7 of every permanent atom in the lower part of man, the 7-fold astral permanent atom and the 7-fold etheric permanent atom, sometimes called the physical permanent atom on the etheric plane, subplane number 1. Now, usually, yeah, I think you can call those pairs of opposites, abstract mind to lower mind. There are many people who are just learning now to think abstractly, and that's a change from their usual concrete mental or lower mind preoccupations. And if we go up the ladder, we find the spiritual intelligent part of the monad, and still higher we find the will aspect of the monad. Now, the next pair of opposites, um, it's easy to see. The soul, or egoic lotus, or causal body, is found on subplane 2 and 3 of the mental plane. Some people have wondered, does the soul move to subplane 1? My reading of all this is that it does not, and the way the soul is influenced from subplane 1 has to do with the monastic permanent atom. So, for more on that, turn to page 168 and 169 in Esoteric Psychology, Volume 2. So indeed these are opposites. They're all found on the mental plane, subplane 2 and 3, in counterposition to the lower mind on subplane 4, 5, 6, 7. And then the lower mind itself has a focus, finally, on subplane 4 of the mental plane, and it's fairly easy to see that, yes, it does make its way. I'm always having a little trouble finding but there it is. And let's see. Okay. Now the mind and the head center are also standing in opposition to each other. And maybe we can see that. The mind on the 4th level, going through the head center of the astral plane here, and landing in the etheric head center on the ordinary etheric physical plane. Now, the irrational part of man is pretty much emotional, etheric, physical. And the rational part is beginning with the lower mind. They are counterpoised with each other. And we have to oftentimes take the mental position in order to understand the irrationalities of the astral, etheric, physical. Well, we're looking at relationships, and we're looking at particularly dualities on this dualistic planet. Because after all, we are called on this planet adjudicators between the pairs of opposites. So first of all, in terms of design, we have to see them and justify that they are indeed, in some reasonable way, opposites, and that's what I've been trying to do here a little bit. And then we have to discriminate between what they have brought into our normal consciousness. When we're doing the identify as being study group, I'm really hoping that for the students and for myself, something very different from the normal stage of consciousness can be accessed. But of course, as it makes its impression, it will have more and more practical impact. Okay, so we've been detecting pairs of opposites on this dualistic planet. These are contrasting points of tension. Every entity is, in a way, a point of tension. And we want to begin to have the living impression of these points of tension so that we transcend what the mind alone can bring, which is then largely an intellectual formulation. Transcend that and recognize, aha, here is the point of tension from which this impression is coming. Every one of these points of tension should have its own qualitative ambience and should be detectable in contrast with other and lower points of tension. Now, when we're simply dealing with the intellectual phase of this study, everything will be colored by the mind, and we will not necessarily be aware of the distinctive ambience which differentiates one point of tension from another, which is either higher or lower. Okay, so These are pairs of opposites, okay, and DK says each of them acts as an invocative agent and produces evocation. The abstract mind invokes and evokes the lower mind, and we can say that that happens reciprocally as well as we work with Antakarana building. The soul and the lower mind both being um, on the same um, systemic mental plane, or sometimes called solar mental plane, invokes and evokes the lower mind. Invocation always comes first. Now, you call for someone, they hear you, and then they respond. That's the evocation. So the soul evokes, eventually, after invoking the lower mind, and the lower mind, through the pool of retained energies in the antichironic building process, both invokes the soul and evokes it. And this is the very beginning of the antichirona process. This is phase one, where we're trying to be focused in the mind, but focused in the mind in such a way that the soul is present in the mind. When we just work with the lower mind, we can invoke and evoke response, of which we're not quite sure what that response might be, but we can judge that it's pretty extensive when you start to look at some of those Buddhas with all the little swirls on the top of their head. There's lots going on in an esoteric manner in relation to the head center. So the lower mind invokes and evokes the head center. And maybe there's something that can be sent out from the activated head center, which both invokes and evokes the lower mind. All of this is a picture of interconnectedness and eventually of harmonious and integrated interconnectedness. So that was a little summary of what the Tibetan means when he says of these pairs of opposites that each of them acts as an invocative agent, a calling agent, if you will, and produces evocation, or the response from the one called. All act as recipients and as transmitters. Such is the chain of interconnectedness between points of tension. So all act as recipients and as transmitters, and all of them together establish the group interrelation and the circulation of the energies, which are the distinctive characteristic of the entire world of force. Yeah. Now, I suppose this is true when we are interacting with other people. We call to them, we call upon them, and we evoke some sort of response. And vice versa also. Just try to see how you call to others and what type of evocation you receive from them. Is it kindly? Is it irritable? Is it brusque? Is it patient? Is it inclusive? The type of evocation that we generate in others tell us something about the manner in which we have invoked. So it's a huge subject. And these are, again, reminding us of three right. All of this is the substratum of the supreme science of contact. Now, without contact, after the great emanative division which has occurred in our universe, we could never get the whole thing back together, as indeed we must. Now, the average man is far away from thinking about these things, but we are students of esotericism, and we can begin to think in more subtle terms. Okay. any entity, any point of tension, both invokes and somehow manages to evoke all receive recipients, transmitters, I wonder, and establishers of group interrelation. Now we really have to get used to this type of interdependent interaction, and we will find that it is all distinctly characteristic of the entire world of force. We will find that. But of course, the problem is so many of us, and certainly the vast majority of non-aspiring human beings, do not think in these terms and have not learned to think in these terms. And that's why Master Decay says that for the average man, occultism is still quite far away. A distant prospect. Now, going on with decay, one point you all need to grasp is that the progressing disciple does not move into new fields or areas of awareness like a steady marching forward from one plane to another, as the visual symbols of the theosophical literature would indicate. Yeah, it's very concrete-minded. I had a employer once. He was very strong Aries and Gemini, and we were talking about ups and downs, but for him, and he used his hand to describe it, there was only a steady marching forward on an incline and going from point to point and never relenting. That is how he saw his progress. But maybe DK sees things differently. What must be grasped, he says, is that all that is ever present. This reminds me of, it reminds me of a fellow I knew when I worked at the Arcane School in New York 40 years ago. And I would somehow usually be at the door before he arrived in the morning. And when I opened the door for him, he said, "Well, it's all happening." And there was a lot of truth to what was said there. All that is ever present. All that is ever present. And if we get rid of our usual conceptions of dimensionality, we find that what is right here. Space, in that sense, is an illusion, conveying to us that we have to travel through space to reach an object that might be of interest to us. In fact, the most remote part of the universe, and who knows what that is present right here. Now that seems to be a bizarre thought. And people will say, well, you're not practical. Look, you have to walk from one room to another to find out what's in the other room. It's not at your point of departure, but in a way, its essence is at our point of departure. And we should practice realizing that. I have a friend, and we sometimes greet each other, and he says, "Hi there." And I say to him, "Hi here." And I would say that to anyone and anything in the universe. It's here. Now, DK goes on. What we are concerned with is the constant awakening to that which eternally is, and to what is ever present in the environment, but of which the subject is unaware, owing to short-sightedness. Well, there's just all kinds of things in the immediate environment. And we might say that being eternally is to extract the beingness of anything from its quality is already a great act. The aim, he says, must be to overcome the undue concentration upon the foreground of daily life which characterizes most people. The intense preoccupation with the interior states or moods of the lower self, which characterizes the spiritually minded people and the aspirants, and the imperviousness or lack of sensitivity which characterizes the mass of men. In short, we are just too impervious no. Now, when you think of your approach to life, are you preoccupied with the foreground of daily life, aware of moods, interior states, which, look, he's still calling this the foreground. So, preoccupied with states or moods of the lower self, which characterize the spiritually minded people, a little lower than the aspirants, and the imperviousness or lack of sensitivity, which when, well, when you put water on a waterproof watch or a water resistant watch, not necessarily the best practice, but it just doesn't go in. Well, what is there about about that which eternally is, which just remains unregistered by us, so that we are really walking around quite blind compared to what might otherwise be perceived. Now, Master DK is not. He knows and can detect what is happening with people. Yeah. well, there's no way I'm going to complete this with this program 20.1. No, I don't want to get into the same kind of trouble I did last time. The kingdom of God is present on earth today. May I interpolate those who exemplify fifth strata or fifth kingdom consciousness. They're sometimes referred to as rounders. Like it was said that even then, Plato was a fifth rounder. Now the majority of human beings are not. They are fourth rounders. And animals are third rounders, and there are some animalistic men who are also third rounders. What a round is always interesting. It is a type of movement from point of tension to point of tension, and it can involve simply one chain with its 7 globes, or maybe 10 if one counts hidden globes, or it can involve the entire scheme and a movement from chain to chain to chain 7 times. It's all so orderly somehow, and we have to understand how we do move and how we have moved forward in our progressive development, in our fulfillment of the number 777. So again, the kingdom of God is present on earth today and forever has been. Now, of course, earth has not been forever, and we have to look at what is meant by that word. But anyway, we'll take it as at least figurative. It's present on earth today and forever has been, but only a few, relatively speaking, are aware of its signs. Okay, the world of subtle phenomena is still phenomena because, to a great extent, they are occurring on the lower 3 subplanes, which are still phenomenal to the solar logos and mostly to the planetary logos. These constitute the world the Buddha would have us avoid. becoming attached to. So the world of subtle phenomena called formless, let's say where the devas are formulated and where they live, called formless, because unlike the physical phenomena which are so familiar, is ever with us and can be seen, and may I add, as DK can see these subtleties, the causal body, the egoic lotus, the apparatus of others, is ever with us and can be seen and contacted and proved as a field for experiment and experience and activity if the mechanism of perception is developed, as it surely can be. So, well, we're becoming more and more aware of these things. I'm recalling, was it 10 years ago? 10 years ago that Steve Jobs passed away from pancreatic cancer, and as he was dying, something opened up to him, and he said, "Oh, wow." And he saw, obviously, the world of aspects of the world of subtle phenomena. This is the opening that we can expect during the Aquarian Age. After all, if it's an age of universality, we have to be able to include that which is not yet included. The DK goes on, the sounds and sights of the heavenly world, as the mystics call it, are as clearly perceived by the higher initiate as are the sights and sounds of the physical plane as you contact it in your daily round of duties. Well, surely this is giving us really something to look forward to, and I told you the story of Mary Bailey contemplating the transition between planes, and she said somewhat quizzically, "You mean exchange this for that?" Meaning there was a whole lot more going on in that than in this. Okay. This world of lower phenomena. As you can tell, I'm kind of trying to blaze through here. My problem is often one of fatigue. I cannot pretend that every time I close my eyes, I'm in meditation deep. Sometimes I'm having what Master Moria calls an absentation, meaning you slip out and you go somewhere else. Well, anyway, but then, of course, sometimes it is meditation. The world of energies, says DK, with its streams of directed force and its centers of concentrated light, is likewise present. And may I interpolate that that's somewhat like the definition of Shamballa that he offers. Sometimes I like to, in this new moon, yeah, well, maybe, is that it? No, that is not it. It says, let's see if I can get it. And that's not it. That's not it either. Let's see if I can. Okay, well, this is not good. So let's see if I can find the new moons. Yeah, that's it. So, sorry for the wheezing and the gasping. But now look what he says, and it looks familiar, doesn't it? Shamballa, where they dwell, exists in physical matter, as do the Kamaras. No, that's not it. This is it. Shambhala is a world of pure energy, of of light, and of directed force. It can be seen as streams and centers of force. Notice that's the one. Streams and centers of force. All forming a pattern of consummate beauty, all potently invocative of the world of the soul and of the world of phenomena. It therefore constitutes, in a very real sense, the world of causes. Okay. So, let's see if I can get back to this. The world of energies, it's called, with its streams of directed force and its centers of concentrated light, is likewise present, to the seer. And the eye of the seer can see it, just as the eye of the mental clairvoyant can see the geometrical pattern which thoughts assume on the mental plane, or as the lower psychic can contact the glamors, the illusions, may I add also, the illusions and delusions of the astral world. Okay, so I've tried to liken this world of energies to what DK said about Shamballa. Streams of directed force and its centers of concentrated light. He said that, something very close to that. So maybe it all, as far as we on the cosmic etheric physical plane are concerned, it all begins with Shambhala. Okay, now DK says something which many people will protest against. Because they have no such experience. The subjective realm is vitally more real than is the objective once it is entered and known. Now this we have, all of us, to look forward to. It's sometimes said that, well, if it doesn't happen before that, that people don't even know they have passed over. They don't even know that they've so-called died, although DK says there is no death. But I'm sure they begin to awaken to that entering into the light where consciousness awakens free from the bonds of flesh. As he tells us when speaking to, was it PGC, or anyway, he was the Chela who was the Jesuit who was murdered by the Nazis, and DK had given him a very potent triangle meditation. So let us somehow remember what is being said here. And that a much greater reality lies beyond the pale beyond the fence of the normal senses and the etheric webs which prevent entry into the higher worlds until a man is ready or until he has passed on. Passed on to where? Well, to a place where all of these subjective contacts are seen as real. Now DK goes on. It is simply, how simple to some and how insuperably difficult to others, apparently, a question of the acceptance, first of all, of its existence, the development of a mechanism of contact, the cultivation of the ability to use that mechanism, note this, at will, and then inspired interpretation. So, easy for some, out of the question for others, hard to accept for some that it even exists. One will not bother cultivating the mechanism of contact. Why should one if one questions whether it even exists or not? If one has not developed the mechanism, one will not develop the ability to use the mechanism at will when one wishes to, and then, according to what one sees, there will be an inspired interpretation, perhaps. Okay. Well, now we have a bit more. Its goal in the evolutionary process. And I suppose we mean sensitivity to this subjective realm, because it has a reason for being, and we can take advantage of that reason. So friends, we began here on page 52, and maybe we went to page 54. Not a lot, but okay. Somehow interesting. And it went that far. Okay, this is program 20.1, and I'm hoping that there's much greater success this time than when I made such a pitiful little attempt, rushed and stuck. In these matters, always give yourself plenty of time. So, 28th of November, and it's 52 to 54. We'll see whether we go on, because Tui and I have that visual again, and it would be for the climate change conference. So it's program 21, and maybe, who knows today, but anyway, XX, and we've gotten as far as 54. Sorry for the slight wobbliness of my voice, and probably some kind of heavy breathing, which tells you that all is not well with me, but it's well enough, I hope, in order to do these programs. So this is another 4 pages coming up on the supreme science of contact and the interactivity which underlies it, from the science of impression to the science or technique of invocation and evocation to the creative work. Now, obviously, friends, we have to make all this as real to ourselves as may be possible. Remember, everything that is surrounding us all the time, even though it's subtle or subjective and not detected by us. But it will be detected as we continue to train ourselves to be more and more sensitive. So, okay. I just want to say that Tuya and I are wishing you the best assimilation of material that is not easy, and our team of Mikhail, Gayata Crow, Star Crow, has a lot of names, and BL and Joe and Harold and Olivia, and also Frederick from Japan, who is very knowledgeable, Frederick Andres. He is always ready to help, and others who are there when the conference time comes around. We wish you lots of good things. And the conversion of all this into reality, the sense of it being real, so that the whole perceptual world can be seen or understood to be occurring within you, and not that you are some foreigner, metaphysical foreigner, looking on and at something that is other than what you are, or not really contained by what you are. So we'll see if we can go on further, and just keep plowing away, friends. Just keep working. Talk to you soon. Bye bye for now.